What kind of car do we have, Fernando?
Hyundai Elantra.
And what are we doing to it?
Subwoofer.
And what do we got for radio?
Factory radio, so we're gonna do like high level.
What's the first thing we do when we get something like this in?
We gotta check for noise canceling.
We also want to see which speaker's putting out the bass sound, if it's coming from the front doors, if it's coming from the back doors, if there's a factory subwoofer.
Amplifier.
Today what we're gonna do is we're gonna take you through the process that we do every day. Sometimes it doesn't make it into the show. Just the basic steps that we do to put an amplifier in a car. So let's get started, shall we? First steps we're gonna do is always get the car prepped for us to do exploratory surgery. Covering the seats, the steering wheel. We put our cool little sock over the gear shifter here. The natural thing to wanna do is get in there and just start testing, but you have to fight that urge. Depending on the year, make, and model of the car is gonna kind of set the pace for what we have to do. Testing for noise and ANC and all that stuff. If the car manufacturers have never done it in the past and it's an old enough car, then we really don't worry about it. We look in the headliner, see if anything has changed, look for random microphones. Hyundais, typically with the base model systems, don't have any of that funky stuff, so we can kind of skip ahead a couple steps. But some of them do have amplified systems that have crossovers. We're gonna do what we call the ear test, where we just take our ear, put it to the door, all the doors, and see what's coming out of them. Do you have a rear sub?
No.
Now after doing the ear test, we found out that there is a tweeter here in the door. This mid-range is playing low sound. The point of the ear test is to check for the frequency you're trying to reproduce. In this case, we're doing a sub amp, so we want to make sure that there's bass coming out of the speaker. There's bass coming out of this speaker. The rear doors are doing it too. Some of these cars, like the Fords, they have actively crossed over deck power. We'll go ahead and once we get to the wire that we're gonna tap, we're gonna throw an RTA on it just to make sure that there is a certain amount of bass there. But we also know that there's going to be limitations because it is a factory deck. If it's actively crossed over, there's really nothing we can do with it other than recommend some form of an EQ or something like that. We want to figure out if this has an amplifier or not. Most of the time, the amplifiers in cars are only in a few places. Typically, they are underneath the seat, either the driver or the passenger, behind the glove box, along the kick panel there. Sometimes they're along the kick panel here, up above the emergency brake. Every now and then, they are built into the center console. And then most of the time, they're located either here, 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 or here, or here in the trunk. We've already looked underneath both seats. We know they're not there. Obviously, as you're going through this, you want to take the easy ones first and move over to the harder. The ones in the dash are going to be the harder ones because usually you have to pull like the glove box down, kick panels out. The trunk's typically the easier place to check after you've looked underneath the seats because usually there's just carpet you can pull down and look. So the obvious question would be, why don't we just pull the radio out and test to see the speakers behind there? And then, you know, like we do when we're putting a new radio on, we can tone generate behind the radio and see if there's an amplifier in the car. The reason why we try to avoid that is because when we're not putting a new radio in, I don't want to run the risk of breaking anything in the dash. This car is fairly easy to take the radio out, it's no big deal, but most cars, you take half the car apart now to get these radios out. If I don't have to pull the radio out of the dash, I really don't want to. And at the end of the day, I'm only looking for a signal that plays low bass. I can test for that without having to pull the radio out. The reason why we're searching for an amplifier is just more of a formality. Like, I know I can grab that door speaker over there, put an RTA on it, and see if it puts out low bass. But we still like to see if there's an amplifier somewhere in the car because, and for the only reason, it may have low level input, meaning the radio might have a variable voltage input into the amplifier. If it does have that, then we don't need a high level to low level adapter, we can just solder in an RCA. We're gonna go ahead and look to see if we can find the amplifier. First we gotta get this stuff out of the trunk. Got our light, got these cool panels here that are easy to remove on both sides. So we can just kind of pull, there we go. Hey, when you look at that, that is an amplifier. Because there is an amp and I can easily get to the plugs here. So I'm gonna go ahead, reach in, unplug it. All right, I'm gonna grab a tone generator. What speaker's that?
Passenger. Driver rear.
What we figured out, and Fernando just told me when he was listening to the speakers, the driver's front tweeter actually wasn't playing, and we've just verified that here. But we do have the wires that we need for the mid bass in the door, which is the tan and a white. Now what we want to do is grab and figure out if we have any form of variable voltage on this. Let's grab a couple more tools, shall we? So we just grabbed out of the toolbox is our RTA and our digital multimeter. We are going to be testing AC. If you've got one of these, obviously you're not going to need one of that, but a lot of you guys don't have this. So we went ahead and brought this so we can show the results on both. Since we know this one plug here is just speaker, that's the smaller of the two, we don't have to worry about that. We're going to come over to this big one. This has a bunch of red and a bunch of black wires on it. My guess those are the power for the amplifier. We'll just test that real quick on DC. Yes, they are. So there's 3 powers and 3 grounds. And then we have 6 more wires and then 2 more way out here. A lot of the times you can strip back the tape and you can kind of see where there's like a shield that surrounds things to find out the audio pairs. So we'll go ahead and remove some of this tape. By removing just a little bit of the tape, we can see we have 2 twisted pairs here, which are going to be our signal input. Now most of the time when you see 2 twisted pairs like this, it's not going to have variable voltage out of experience, but we're still going to test it anyways. So I'm going to get Fernando to turn on some sound for me. Turn the volume down. So we have no variable voltage. We're pretty much done back here. There's really nothing we can use on this amplifier. We're gonna go over to the driver's front kick and grab our wires, which is gonna be brown and white. We'll tape this back up, plug this back in, head over there. Now, what I was hoping to show you is that if there was some variable voltage, we could have used the digital multimeter to display it. But what you saw on this was just that straight sound that didn't move. And then up here you saw a voltage. That voltage is what would be displayed on this here. You can use this and that voltage will move as you turn up and down the volume, but if it just stays fixed like it did on this, then you know that there's no variable voltage here. That's how you would use this. Next step is to figure out the location of the amplifier. In this case, we're doing this guy right here. The little Rockford Prime 500.1 has a bass knob. We're gonna do the LP7-2 high-low. That's what we always use. We have a Stinger Select 4-gauge kit to power it. Fernando is now going to unbolt the seat. This is our go-to spot. As you guys know, we like to put things underneath the seat. And if you've been watching the show, you know we do a lot of amps under the seats. We get a lot of questions of, do we have heat issues or anything like that? No, and we live in Florida. It gets hot here in the summertime, the wintertime, pretty much all the time. There's a certain amount of heat here, and we don't have issues with the amplifiers overheating. It's all good. We've done enough to test to know that there's not a problem with that. Tip the seat back and see what kind of room we have. As you can see, the amplifier fits fine. There's plenty of room for the LC. No problems there. It'll go right in place. How you thinking of building it?
This is a bar right here, like an L bracket mounted right here and screw into this bar.
The nice thing about this is we're going to bring the wires out and there's plenty of room right here to run the wires over. You have holes all along these Hyundais, these areas here, so it's great, easy to tuck wires. And generally, not always, but generally there is some form of a ground bolt somewhere along here, and or this is also a good place to bolt it in. You can go bolt here, you can bolt over here along the running board. We'll get this side up, we'll figure out where we're gonna do all that. Fernando's building this. I'm gonna go ahead and start taking the car apart. We're gonna be running wires along here. We're gonna be running wires along here. So we're gonna go ahead and take this whole T side out, lift up the back seat here, start tapping our speaker wires. Kind of split the workflow so that we're both constantly doing something throughout the install. Helps move the thing along. Now, not to jump ahead, but eventually we'll be here and we'll be figuring out how to mount the fuse, but that comes much later. Fernando's gonna take some measurements, figure out how he wants to build this.
I got my measurements. Let's go get some plastic.
What we got going on here is this is the mount that he came up with. You guys just saw him build this. It's got 2 screw holes, one here, one over there. He went ahead and laid it out, took a small drill bit, drilled through here into scratch, what we call the metal. So then he could remove this, cut little squares into the carpet.
So just in case if he want to remove the amplifier later on, we can put that and
covers it back up, makes it look factory.
Yeah.
We just do a U-cut, taper these bits out and make them big enough so that we can then grab one of these guys here. These are the cool little threaded rivets. Inside of these we can put one of these screws here. It'll bolt down into the frame. This is better than just grabbing like a self-tapping screw and just screwing the amp in. Go ahead and get you two. Now, because of where it's located, we have two different methods of doing this. This one here looks like a standard riveter. A lot harder to use. You gotta really man up on it, but this will allow him to get in these tight quarters like this. Man up on it, man. Squeeze. Now we have a nice clean mount that we can screw that amplifier to, and then if we need to, like you said, we can pull that carpet up, put it back to factory. Now that we have the car apart, this will be the wire we'll attach to run our power wire. It's got this cool little piece right here that's going to allow us to bring our wires up and attach to it. We know that the wire is going to run from the back up to the front. We don't know if it's going to come across the car and come up this way, if it's going to come up the passenger side and come across the dash. What we do know is we're looking for a brown and a white wire. There's a giant bundle of wires right here, and I'm looking at a brown and a white wire. We want to test those. Now, never assume that just because you find a twisted brown and white wire that match the exact same twisted brown and white wire in the back, that that's what it is. There's a couple different ways that we can test this wire. For one, we could do a continuity test between the plug in the back and this wire right here. If we have continuity, which is when you set your meter up for this cool little radiating speaker and you go, that's going to tell us that that wire is this wire. Another test that you can do is tap into the wire. These are our test probes. And then do an ohm load test or continuity test on to see if you have an ohm load that matches the speaker. In this case, we have two. We tested the ohm load in the back, which we didn't show on camera, I'm sorry, to see what ohm load it was so we'd have an idea of what this is, and it was also 2. So now that we have a 2 ohm load here, 2 ohm load here, chances are good this might be the speaker. Now we want to do a little bit of toning to see. Now when you grab your tone generator, start with the voltage all the way down. And we have tone. We know that these are the speaker wires going into this. One last test we want to do in the speaker is find out which one is positive and which one is negative. And for that, we need to do a little polarity test. White is positive. We're just going to simply take our wire strippers, strip back a portion of this wire here, take a pick tool, poke a hole in it, thread the needle, and then just wrap it around the outside like this. 3 or 4 times is generally good. At this point, if you don't have a soldering gun, no problem. Put some tape over it, put a zip tie over the bundle, put another zip tie on the wire so it's a nice firm connection. Not everyone likes to solder in a car, I get that. Something like this, we'll put a little drop of solder on it though. Now, personally, I like to put a zip tie around it when I'm done, whether I'm soldering it or not, and that's to hold the tape, because sometimes the tape, when it gets really hot, might become sticky. Who knows? I mean, chances are good it'll never fall off, but just to be safe. I'm not going to put any more zip ties on it because we're going to have a 4 gauge running along here. So we'll zip tie the 4 gauge to this, which in turn will zip tie that up. Let's go check in on Fernando and see how he's coming on getting the amplifier screwed down in the wire. So he's gone ahead and mounted the amplifier to the panel. This is the back, this is where those screws go in, so we don't have to worry about any little kitties or anything kicking this. All the controls will be out of the front where pretty much no one will ever get to. We have our pack audio high level to low level mounted here. These need power. Have a yellow, black, blue. They're going to just attach into here. We're gonna run them in with our 2 power wires that are coming in. Progress is moving along. We're gonna get into the car and figure out where we're going through the firewall. Firewalls can be a tricky beast because each one is a little bit different, and you have to be careful because you don't want to affect the brake booster or any other wiring harness. Now sometimes, like this car, you get lucky. You see this guy right here, this would be where the clutch pedal goes. In a lot of cars, if it's just a brake and a gas pedal, there is going to be a provision for where the clutch would be, and you can drill through the firewall. That's not always the case. I can tell you in Toyotas, that's not the case. Nissans, that's usually not the case. Meaning there's nothing on the other side. Because there's nothing there on the inside, they typically mount stuff there to make our lives difficult. So we typically have to remove all that stuff. But let's go and check the firewall from the engine bay side and see if there's anything where the clutch booster would be. That area right there, that is where the clutch assembly would be if it had one, so there's nothing there. So it's gonna be safe for us to drill a hole. For drilling holes in firewalls, we have this guy right here. This is a Milwaukee close quarter drill. This is made for like if you're building a house, you have 2 2x4s and you need to drill between them a decent sized hole with some power. It works great for firewalls. At this point, the prep work for the amplifier that's soon to be going in here is done inside the car. What we're gonna move out to now is the fuse holder. This is what we have to deal with. We've got this. We're gonna need to get a screw over to this bolt right here. This bolt is a fuse. This bolt is off of this bus bar. This bolt is the one we want right here. This bolt has a V-shaped bottom to it that's designed to tighten up as you twist this, so we're not gonna use that. And what we need to do is get our wire over to here. Now there's enough room so that we can actually come up through here and attach to there. And we're thinking we're gonna use that bolt right there to make our mount for our fuse holder. Then we'll just mount our fuse holder right like this. Fernando just finished wiring this up, and like we said, this bundle here, this will go out those cool air vents because there's all that open space. And then as the wires come out, we'll further insulate them. The amplifier is now in. It's not mounted yet, but the wires are run, like we said, through that vent. They're up here, and as you can see, we've gone ahead and further insulated them. This is our speaker wire that's going to connect to this speaker wire here, and then this will be zip tied up and eventually work its way up through the hole we drilled in the firewall. Right now, Fernando is going ahead and put some of the flexible loom onto the subwoofer wire so that that'll be insulated through the back of the car, and then we'll go ahead and get this into the back. Let me show you what subwoofers we're going with, because you guys always ask, well, hey, what's up? So here you go. We're doing the Kicker Comp C-Box. It's the 212s. Fuse holders in, wires mounted. It's all secure. We're done under the hood. Power wire and the signal wire all zip tied up and ran along here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna get these side panels put back on. We'll do a little tuning and let you hear how it sounds. Well, guys, what do we say, Fernando?
On to the next one.
You're like hidden back here.
He's a ghost.